Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Baka podcast.
Baka. It's amazing how every time you open your mouth, you prove you're an idiot.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Baka. We are an anime podcast who every 2 weeks we come together to discuss an anime and that we have watched, like as we're a book club, and then we turn our discussion over to our audience. That is the concept of this podcast, and we have finally gotten to the big hit of the last 2 seasons, Ranking of Kings. We're talking about the first 11 episodes on this podcast, and then we'll be talking about up to episode 23 in our next episode. So to do that, I need the help of my co-host. And first off, we have the friend.
Are you trying sign language?
Hold on. You're just getting this?
I'm seeing it, but at first I thought it was just like spazzing out, and yeah, but it's 2 in sync, you know?
So,
I mean, I remember.
I don't know sign language.
I know. I was like, I don't recognize those. I grew up with a deaf cousin that I had to learn some, so I don't recognize those.
So you ship my friend. So you're the friend of my ship. Jeremy, how are you? Also great for an audio podcast. He's doing sign language. How does that help?
Yeah, right. Another reason I called it out.
Wow.
Yes.
All right, Jeremy, how you doing?
I am doing well. Yeah, I discovered. So okay, you get your choice. Do you want Moon Knight or do you want Factorio?
Moon Knight.
Oh, Moon Knight.
Okay, so Factorio was awesome. I'm really enjoying this game. I was looking through my Steam list. Okay, so yeah, Moon Knight was very interesting. I think it's way too fast, like from scene to scene, but I really got into the character. Oscar Isaac does a fantastic job with his acting, and Ethan Hawke, of course, did great too. But it kind of felt like they carried the show, where it was where acting was concerned, and even in some of the directing, I felt a little bit let down compared to what the scenes seemed to be pushing for, like the kind of excitement and everything that was going on, or the drama. The drama didn't always land for me, but I do love the character. I didn't know how interesting Moon Knight was as a character. I remember when I was playing Marvel Ultimate Alliance was like the first time that I ever saw this character, and I was like, wow, he's really fun to play. I like this. This is going to be the new character I like to play as. And I thought he was just like crazy Batman, but
so sometimes he is. It depends
Really?
who's writing him. Sometimes he doesn't have the powers of a god. Sometimes he's just a crazy millionaire running around who thinks he does. And then sometimes another writer will step in and be like, oh no, that was a psychotic episode. He actually does have the power of God, and he thought he didn't.
That's funny. That's really cool though, because it means that, each writer has the ability to essentially be another voice in his head, which is cool.
That's why every comic of Moon Knight, you're like, I can't trust this, even though I'm enjoying it and I'm taking the story in itself. I can't trust it in the overall lore. And I think they did that well in the show, where even at the end, it was like, this could still not be real. They left that open.
Sort of. I mean, not with the after credit scene.
Yeah,
Really.
But that could be in his head too.
Well, yeah. I mean, hypothetically, the whole thing could be, I guess.
Anyway, I don't want to spoil it, so we could definitely discuss that.
Right on.
All right, here we go again. We have the stupid to my.
Wow.
Jason, how you doing?
Didn't the sign language hurt so bad?
Yeah, that was
You have no idea how much work went into that. Puns don't translate well to a language without sound. When the puns are based on sound, written puns work well for it. And because sign language is so abstract, I had come up with a really good insult, and it ended up looking like I was asking for indecent things instead, because just that's how abstract the idea is. I'll tell you the full story later. That doesn't need to be recorded. Jason, how are you?
Pretty good. Speaking of factory games, Satisfactory came out with their 5.0, and I haven't played since 3.0. So no.
There is a new Path of Exile update, and I actually wanted to hear about it because everyone's going crazy about it.
It's not out yet.
Okay. I just seen videos, people reacting to it and being all excited. I expected you to talk about it.
Oh.
I chose not to watch those videos so I could hear from you.
Yeah, it's I need to read more about it, because you're right. The community is kind of blown up about it, but I'm just like looking at it going, there's a bunch of quality of life. There were no balance changes, so it's like, okay.
I guess you played last time is still just as strong as it was before.
Right. There's no meta shift, so it's like, okay, I guess I'll just do the same thing I did last time, but we'll even see if I play this league. But yeah, Satisfactory's been great. But what I really wanted to touch on is my son and I went through Markiplier in Space, and that was really fun. And then he didn't want to do number 2, but I did number 2, and the writing's fantastic, and it takes me back to the time when I was 12, 15. I got a hold of like 4 or 5 choose your own adventure books. And, you'd read the first 5 pages, and it's like, you can do this and flip to page 147, or you can do this and flip to page 52. And doing that 5 or 6 times in a row, it really took me back to that. And the writing's great, and it reaches back into other like Markiplier lore, if you're familiar with the channel and his different characters. So yeah, that was a blast.
Did you go back and watch the paths you didn't take?
I did some of them. I didn't do. The thing is like there's probably about 3-4 hours of content there to go back and kind of relive a bunch of them. I know Troy did a bunch with the first one. But yeah, I think I went through the first one like 3 or 4 times, and then the second one I did twice. So
cool. I haven't personally done the second one. My son went through it, and he got to the good ending, and so I was good, because it seemed like you only really got to 2 different choices at the very end. So I figured I was probably good. But
one thing I'll say, being a YouTuber for so many years, he's obviously been able to like transform from his caricature that he would play into more of like probably who he is as a person. But in this, so a lot of the scenes are kind of goofy. They're almost Dora the Explorer-ish as they're talking to the camera. Near the end of the good ending one, he puts on a performance that was 100% believable, and I was very impressed. Like that, these are acting chops he was putting out. I'm like, that's fantastic.
Yeah, I remember thinking like he's got some talent. I could see him doing some comedy in a real movie, but honestly, I just appreciate the hustle and the innovation of, I'm not gonna just keep screaming at scary games, and I'm gonna look for ways to expand what I do and push limits of YouTube. And I think his choose your own adventure stories are really cool.
Yeah. And I like how they're all tying together. So
yeah.
I always have trouble with the YouTuber personalities because they feel so disingenuous when they are reacting to things, and just their speech patterns don't come across as genuine. I
struggle with old Markiplier.
Yeah.
Back when his hair was really he dyed his hair a lot and stuff. It was pure screaming. Early Markiplier, especially. I get that, Jeremy, really bad.
Yeah.
And I the same way. I can't really watch old Markiplier. Markiplier now is still there a little bit, but he's much better than he used to be.
So to promote In Space number 2, he went through like 12 or 16 of his Try Not to Laughs, and he made that same comment. He was like, wow, look at me back at my first Try Not to Laugh, where I'm screaming into the mic, and because something's loud, it's funny, and just everything is kind of wacky and out of proportion. And then like as he's going through the videos, he's like, wow, this is like lining up with who I am at like slowly as I go through the videos.
All right, so this is not a podcast about Markiplier. My name is Troy. I have no sign language for that, despite me just touching my head.
I was just going to call you Helen Keller, but go on.
Oh.
Yeah, here I was enabling people with a disability, but yeah, you go ahead and just throw that out there. Enjoy those comments. I was also going to talk about Moon Knight. I mostly agree with Jeremy. I don't have much of an issue with the acting because really 90% of the thing is Oscar Isaac acting against himself and doing it and nailing it. So I paid almost no attention to anyone else's acting. The action was a little bit stiff, and I thought the final episode's action was much better than some of the other stuff. But just the fact that they took a character as crazy and as weird as Moon Knight and made a show that's as crazy and weird as he deserved, that I really enjoyed. That was what I was hoping for when they announced Moon Knight. It was exactly what I got. I'm good. That's great. Hope he shows up.
I remember reading that one of the actors, a French guy that was playing a minor villain, died, and I was wondering if you had heard anything about him having a bigger role that maybe had to be cut.
Oh yeah, he was. I did hear about that. It was the rich guy in the middle. He's supposed to be a Moon Knight villain. They go to a rich guy because he has a sarcophagus they need to decipher, and he gets all involved, and then they just kind of beat him really quickly, and it's not a thing. And it was because that actor died. He's supposed to become a Moon Knight villain.
Yeah, and I kind of wonder how much that has to do with the pace. If the pacing was set off because they'd already recorded some scenes and then had to cut them and stitch things together. So I was kind of forgiving because of that reason.
Marvel's in a weird place right now because everything I watch, I always like, this feels like it could have been a TV show, or I watch the TV shows and like, this felt like it was written as a movie, and then they chunked it up and did some anime Dragon Ball Z screaming scenes to spell it. I did want to tell Jeremy that I have played Subnautica for the past 2 days.
That's amazing. Okay, tell me.
I just figured out how to make the fixing gun and fixed my escape pod. That's
awesome.
As far as I am.
First impressions of swimming around.
Yeah.
Is it terrifying?
Yeah, I'm honestly terrified of the ocean. That's a real fear of mine. And
have you left the shallows at all?
I've only gone to the kelp, so if that's still considered the shallows, then no.
It's semi-shallows, yeah.
Yeah. It's like the one, there's coral on the surface, and they're like, hey, there's some kelp down there, and then like, hey, there's something past that. No, I'm good. Kelp.
Yeah, exactly.
We're fine right here.
Yep. SOS? Oh, I'm sorry. Someone else is gonna have to respond.
Yeah, I'm having fun. Awesome. It's not my type of game building stuff, but I had that itch, and I'm like, well, it was free on Epic, and Jeremy had just said, and I had watched some YouTubers playing some other game, and I just felt like, I felt like crafting, so I did.
Yeah, there's a mod for it, the Nitro mod that lets you play player.
No,
that's multiplayer.
Oh, okay. You're saying we could play together. Nah, you're too good at it. Let me just go slow and stupid. Because that's really what it is. I was like, what am I going to eat? There's like fish
everywhere.
There's nothing to eat. I'm going to die.
Did you figure out where to get fresh water?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
The jellyfish. There's the one fish. Yeah.
The best way.
And then I found some in a storage tank.
Yep.
Oh, there's one in here the whole time. I should have looked. Anyway, we need to talk about our anime. There's a lot to talk about, a lot of characters to talk about. So we are talking about the first 11 episodes of Ranking of Kings, and we're going to start off with our non-spoiler review. Jeremy, why don't you start us off?
I really liked this anime, at least the first season so far. I mean, it's definitely an emotional anime, a drama anime. The main character is very whiny, but it's justified. There's a lot of crying, but it's justified. The character is also adorable. The show really goes a long way to try and make everything as cute as possible. But what's really weird is that the art style is, it gives off these vibes of almost like French art. It's odd when you're expecting anime to have the characters' faces be etched out the way that like, Despa, one of the characters in it, his face has a very distinct art style, and then there's a couple of other characters that have a completely different shape to their face, and you just don't see that in anime. In anime, one of the criticisms a lot of people have is that you can't tell which character is which if you don't know anime and you're not, able to pick apart the subtle differences. Of course, they don't seem subtle to me because I've been watching it for so long, but this was really drastic, very interesting. All the characters feel really fleshed out, and I have very few criticisms. So, yeah, I really liked it. Also, just as a side note, I got Tanya to watch one episode, and it was like pulling teeth to get her to sit down and watch it. And her first words were, "What the heck is this? Did Troy pick this? I know Troy picked this, didn't he?" And then... And then we watched the first 8 episodes straight, and she didn't want to stop. And the next day we finished it up. So it was a hit with her.
And then I'm sure she said, Troy has really good taste, and I have misjudged him.
She went, "Everybody gets one."
I love you, Todd. All right, Jason, what were your thoughts?
This anime felt like I want to have my cake and eat it too. I want to be cutesy, but I want to be serious. I want to be moody, but I also want to be funny. I don't know. It didn't hit with me. Again, have cake, eat it too. I didn't find myself really attaching to any of the characters, but I love the world they're building. I'm really interested in the lore and the conspiracy of what's going on. But yeah, there's a lot of crying. The crying's warranted. I mean, it's basically coming from children, so I get that. Yeah. But I just, this isn't one. The art style is off-putting for me as well.
I thought when I picked this, I was getting an almost shonen thing with very cute animation, but very well done action sequences, which they are, but they're actually fewer and far between than I thought they'd be. And I thought it'd be like, oh, I have to go fight up the ranks of games. What I got was PG Game of Thrones. I think we've all said that at some point now, that it's the PG version of Game of Thrones. All the political intrigue, and I find that it uses its art style to get away with its hardcore nature. There's a dark underside to everything that's pretty and cute on the top side, which is kind of what you're talking about, Jason, the having the cake eating it too. But I found it used it very similar to what Made in Abyss did. We could have these adorable character models, and then we can just torture the heck out of them and not have people say we're being disgusting, because, I mean, there's bodies that get ground up. There are body parts getting cut off. We get talks of flesh being stripped. And I sat down my 8-year-old son to watch this with me thinking this is going to be really cute. And there's nothing visually that's really that bad. He loved the heck out of it. But also, there were times where I'm like, I have to talk about this with my son now about why that happened. Okay. So there's a grittiness to it. I very much enjoyed it. I love the political intrigue, and this is one of the first times I thought, now this is world building the way I like world building to be, which is, we're going to show you something. We're not going to explain it. This world is too mysterious and magnificent for us to go in every detail of everything you see. There's just a monster walking by in the background that the characters have to hide from. We're not going to talk about that monster. We're not going to say where that monster came from. That's just this world. That's just what is going on in the world. That reminds me of Star Wars. They go into the cantina. We don't learn what all these aliens are. They don't all have a name. They do, but the movie's not going to take time to tell us. That's my type of world building. So I love that about this. So definitely hit for me.
It also has a pretty strong, in my opinion at least, unreliable narrator, because there's quite a few things that are introduced to you inaccurately. And then as the show goes on, you realize, oh, that's not what really happened. Okay.
Yeah, I love the morality of the characters in that no character is just evil. Every character makes bad choices and it affects other characters in evil ways, but almost everyone has like their own agenda that is understandable in a lot of ways. And you're like, oh, okay, I guess I hadn't thought about their point, or they were being loyal to this person and trying to be honorable. It's to me, the politics of it all made it fascinating.
I do have one complaint with Troy. Last time you told me this was chibi, and I went into it thinking I'm going to hate it, and then it ended up not being chibi, and I go, oh, this isn't so bad, and then the animation was still off-putting, and I was like, Troy double got me.
Boji looks a little chibi to me.
He looks childish.
Right. He's got a big old head and a little tiny body.
I wouldn't call that chibi.
All right. My bad then.
This chibi is okay with Jason.
No, it's not. Oh, go away.
All right. Let's talk about the opening and the closing. What did you guys think?
Could not stand the opening. Really liked the closing.
So go ahead.
Yeah. So the visuals and the song of the opening. I don't like the song didn't hit with me, and the visuals don't really tell much about the story unless you're into the story. It's very much, this is Boji running around, and then here's some tertiary scenes of other stuff, and it's just like I didn't like it. But the outro, the visuals weren't spectacular, but I liked the song.
So I actually skipped them every single time. So I actually had to watch them right before the episode just so I could at least be informed of what they sounded like. And I did hear the beginning, like 5 seconds of the opening every time, and it was great. I love the sound of it. But I was just trying to make sure we got as many episodes as possible before Tanya left, so I was skipping them. And then as for the outro, I actually like the whole song in the outro. Can't say the same for the intro after I watched it, but yeah.
The intro had to grow on me, and I have a very specific complaint about it, and that's I watched this on Crunchyroll, and I watched the subtitle version, and it would show the lyrics in English of what they were singing. Mm-hmm. And every time I read those lyrics, I was like, this feels so like it doesn't fit. They're talking about soda falling flat and like very modern references in this fantastical world, and it clashed, and it didn't work with me. As soon as I started ignoring those after like the second or third episode, I'd like prep my notes and stuff. I started getting into the song. It started like growing on me. And I like the visuals of the beginning and the ending, both how they focus on the main friendship of the story and also the characters following our main character behind, which is kind of a thing. He's going to be him, and then people start following him because of that. And I like that visual that they have in the OP to kind of introduce that concept. All right, let's. We don't need to really talk about what we're watching next because it's still this. The rest of the episode's episode 23. So if you're following along with us, that's what we will be watching next. And we can go on to our spoiler section. So if you have not seen it and wish to do so, at this point we will be revealing spoilers for the rest of the podcast. For the first 11 episodes, obviously. All right. Ranking of Kings is about a fantasy world where kings are ranked. And the guy taking notes did not write the 3 things you get ranked for. I know strength is one of them. I think money was the other, and then
like influence, maybe.
Yeah, something about your people, maybe.
Yeah, I can't remember either. It didn't seem to be that important.
Despite the name of the anime, not a huge plot point.
No.
That was the other thing that kind of bugged me.
How
When's
dare
the
you
ranking start?
Like when I watched Game of Thrones and they weren't playing Monopoly for the throne. How dare they? All right. And we meet our main character. We actually see him. He's a young 10-year-old boy. And we see him with his giant mother, literally a giant. And he promises her that he will become the greatest king. And then we see him as his 10-year-old self, walking in his underwear through the streets of the village and being laughed at. one thing I want to comment on this is how much it takes inspiration from like Hans Christian Andersen fairy tales, like I don't think Emperor's New Clothes is one of those, but stories like that you grew up, those old fairy tales you grew up with, and then twist them, give them dark edges, and so I really enjoyed that. But this is Boji. He is both deaf and mute, and he is the oldest prince of the kingdom of Boss, and he is our main character. So what did you guys think of Boji?
I don't know.
Jeremy, why don't you go first?
Yeah, Jeremy, go ahead.
Jason's favorite character. Well, I mean, in the first episode, he makes a lot of noise, and none of it makes sense. And I mean, I know that's his character. It's what he's gonna do. But I was actually genuinely wondering how long is the anime gonna keep doing this? Like, because the amount was just too much of him constantly going and so that was really rough. But they kind of pulled back on that, and when they started introducing other characters and started letting the plot develop a bit, and they used it in a more endearing way, and so it was better. As far as a character, I think he's interesting. He's definitely adorable, and that's clearly what they're going for. So, good job. But it's also like I have a little bit of, and maybe this is just me after the fact. I've had some time to think about it a bit. His relationship with Kage just, I don't know. It doesn't land real great for me. Like, I don't really care about their relationship, and I don't know. Maybe it's more Kage's fault, but yeah. But anyways, I don't know. There's nothing really important to say about him, I think.
I think Kage to me, Kage feels like his mouthpiece, and that's about it. And there's this relationship or this friendship, and I'm here for you kind of stuff, and I don't know, for me it fell a bit flat. But as far as a character, Boji, I'm less interested about Boji and more interested about the surroundings of him and the lore of the world around him. He was born to two giants, but he's smaller than a regular human child. And they keep hinting at that he's got latent giant genes that will never come to fruition, or even the DOS sees that he's got a curse that's suppressing his giantness. But I love the fact that, you guys mentioned earlier, I think in the pre-show, that, he can consume things and think they taste good that most people can't, or are literally poisonous. So like I said, I think there's a lot of interesting things about the story surrounding him. I don't find his character very interesting.
All right. Let me explain why Boji is one of the greatest anime characters of all time.
Oh, wow.
Sorry.
Okay.
Cool.
Okay, maybe that's hyperbolic.
Yeah.
But I do love this character, and I do think he is a great character, because he's a character who, to me, represents the theme of the series, which is empathy, and he is like the human embodiment of empathy. We see him get attacked by a wild snake. We'll talk about that later. And then as soon as it's off of him, he's worried about it. Like, hey, I'm in danger. Stop. Okay, now I'm not in danger anymore. I'm worried about another creature. We see this multiple times with him. We see it with his relationship with Kage, who I will get into why his relationship is important. But Boji's empathy not only is carrying the theme of the show, it's also his greatest strength. It is why so many characters rally to him. The anime is not subtle about, like, he has to be stronger than everyone else. He's in a world where he's disabled. He can't hear, he can't talk. He taught himself to read lips, and all he did was hear people see people mocking him. He's a guy who the world disregards, yet he's determined to lead it. And that's his arc. He has to go from, they all look down on me, and now I need to get them to look up to me. And how does he go about that?
It's interesting that you say that he embodies empathy. I didn't see empathy when I was watching. I just saw optimism, like a naive, innocent optimism that wouldn't die. No matter what difficulty that he faced, he just kept not defeating things through will, but just through pure optimism.
There's a point where a character tries to kill him, and I was watching this with my kids, and they were like, "Oh, that guy's the worst." And I go, "He is the worst." And you know what the worst part is? Boji's totally going to forgive him. And tell me he won't. Tell me Boji's not going to run into him and be like, "No, it's cool."
Oh, yeah, for sure. He will.
The other part that I have a problem with is, like, the story centers around these two princes, but mostly around Boji, who's a prince. And, you mentioned, he's determined to go be a leader. Because we can't hear him speak, not once have we heard that conviction. We've just seen him kind of go through motions that other people have sent him on this path to possibly become stronger, to become that leader. And it's like, because we can't hear from him, I have no idea if he wants to be a king or not, or if he wants to rule.
Oh, he did say that he wants to. And especially, like, there's a point where he gets off the throne and runs out because he didn't get picked, because he's angry. But I do agree with you that, like, a king has to be able to communicate. He has to be able to hear issues, not necessarily physically hear, but he has to be able to address issues that are brought before him. And that's one thing that I didn't see with Boji. The whole time up till when he started studying with Despa was the first time I saw him read anything. And then I realized, okay, so he did get princely training to read, because in all the flashbacks and all the events that we see up to that point, he's always just running around being a goof in the garden, doing something. He's never interacting with people in a way that a king would need to. A king needs to be able to address issues. So I always wondered, when people thought that Boji would be able to be a successful king, because a couple people voted yes, how? How? Because he's not going to be able to perform his duties. And there were times in real world history where kings were simply deemed unable to perform their duties and eliminated, or they were allowed to become king and then they ruined the place that they were ruling over.
Or they were puppeted.
Yeah, or they were puppeted, exactly. So the whole premise of Boji working his way up the ranking of kings and even being fit to be a king, I like the fact that the anime is kind of saying, yeah, most people don't think he's fit to be king. I just happen to be in that group. Like, there's no way. Not until he takes it seriously and starts communicating.
So I dropped off the call, but I think I get the gist
Yeah.
of what I missed. So first to Jeremy, I think even the people who voted for him are doing so because his father picked him and are like, look, if the king said he should be king, he should be king.
Agreed.
And
Yeah.
aren't like, no, Boji's shown great leadership skills, guys. Look at the way he manages money or anything like
Right.
that. Exactly. To Jason, I completely disagree. Especially since we advocate all the time about showing, not telling. And I think this entire anime is showing Boji working towards that goal. But that's, plot? Yes. Like, hey, I'm trying to get stronger. I don't know what you're wanting from him besides quit trying to have an arc that's so arbitrary. I don't get it.
I don't know. It seems like the story's happening to him, not him going on a journey.
But he's the one who chose to go on a journey.
No, he was sent. What are you talking about?
No. He asked the queen, and she said no, and he's like, no, I really want to go. He tried to sneak out, and she's like, okay, well, he's going to sneak out and get himself killed, so I might as well send him with protection. But it was his choice because his new best friend had disappeared.
Now, she decided where he was going to go when she allowed him to leave, because that wasn't necessarily where he wanted to go. So in that way, if that's what you meant, Jason, I can see where you're coming from. But yeah, he had some agency, just not complete.
Right. And I guess the other problem is that they're so young. So there's a lot of leeway given as far as storytelling is for the seriousness of it, if you will. Because again, we've got these immature, naive characters trying to do this coming of age story. But then we have other scenes where a dude stabs another dude in the chest, and as he's bleeding out, gets swallowed up into the ground. And it's like, what is this story?
I like that part. I like the aspect.
I feel like you just nailed what the story is.
Yeah.
And I want to touch on something Jeremy said. I think he nailed it. He has limited agency, but I think that's his hurdle to overcome. Nobody wants him to have agency. The queen's like, hey, I love this kid with all my heart. I will protect this kid till my dying day. He can't be king. He can't handle it.
Mm-hmm.
Helicopter parents, right? His entire struggle is nobody will give him the opportunity to prove himself. Even when he's winning a fight, everyone's like, that's not the way you're supposed to win a fight. And then he's told, you got to take your beating, kid. And he's not allowed to win. They take his agency from him over and over again, and he keeps pushing on anyway to claim it.
Now, I do think that when we get the information about like the flashback from his father, the king, and his father says, I want to build this kingdom so that he can have everything he ever wanted, basically. I'm going to try and make his life as easy and good as possible. This kid in all the flashbacks did not look like he was training to be a king. He looked like he was doing whatever he wanted. He was picking flowers, running around chasing bugs and chasing creatures, whereas his younger brother was training and preparing. And that actually is the issue between the younger brother and him later as to why the younger brother is so angry with him. It's because he wasn't working. He's always pitied, and he's always allowed to slack off when it comes to like princely duties because of his disabilities. And so I wasn't convinced that they were actually putting him through the steps necessary for him to be a king. It was more like he was just the wild child that happened to have royal blood.
You're right, partially, because that whole scene is about how Domas failed his duties. Domas is discouraged by how weak he is and is like, yeah, whatever, go catch a bug. But then we see this giant 3-headed snake shooting boulders at the kid, like he's training anyone who will train him. But Domas wasn't the guy. Domas was like, no, this is a waste of my time. I love this kid, but training him, what's the point of that? So you're right, but it wasn't Boji's choice. It was, again, characters not giving him the agency he deserved. And then, hey, here's this 3-headed snake who recognizes his value and trains him, and is one of the greatest skills in the entire anime.
It's a great skill, but it has nothing to do with being a king.
In their world, it's one of the 3, except for it has no. It's all defense. It's half of it. Yeah,
as ranking. Yeah. One other issue that I have with Boji, and this is just a fundamental rejection of the premise of his ability. If you have no physical strength, and obviously that's hyperbole because he can move, then you would not be able to exert yourself to have the kind of speed that he has. That is just
Super Saiyan speed, you mean?
Yeah, like
there's literally a scene where he does the like after image movement, and I swear I heard the
exactly.
Wait, which anime is this?
Yeah, he also runs down a sheer brick wall. That's the first thing that happens in episode 1. When you see him, he jumps up the wall, and then he runs down the side of this sheer brick wall. Yeah, exactly. And so those things don't jive very well with, has no strength whatsoever, can't pick up anything. But it was such a small thing that it really didn't affect, only mildly affect my enjoyment.
Yeah, I just saw that as an element of the anime. We see that in comic books, like, hey, Superman's the strongest, but Flash can go faster. But isn't that the Flash's muscles literally pushing him faster than Superman can? No,
Speed
it's
Force.
different. Strength and speed are different.
The Speed Force.
They
Yeah,
tied together.
It's the magic.
But yeah, so yeah, I just saw it as the anime saying strength is a thing. It's not even muscle related, and neither is speed. That's like a stat bar in an RPG almost. That they're filling
it's
up.
like his agility or his dexterity.
Which if this was an isekai, we'd probably be like, oh yeah, that's how this world works, but it's not an isekai, so.
Yep.
All right.
So
Any
that's
other thoughts on Boji? Because I Jason, if you want to rebuttal, I need to give you your shot.
No, I might be being too hard on it just because the story's not landing with me as far as the storytelling, and him being mute is detrimental in some of these more emotional scenes to me. I am super interested in what's going to happen with the resolution of what made him born so small. I'll put it that way. I'm very interested to see what happens. I'm very hesitant to give this a low rating based on just this half and like hating on Boji, but like unfortunately that's information I don't have yet, right? So
I know I bring him up every podcast, and that's probably not fair to all other listeners. But I had been commenting about this on Twitter. About GamerDad reached out, and so just so you know, you're not alone. He said he's tried multiple times to get into the show, can't watch it. So I know there's at least one other person out there that follows
this show,
us.
Ranking of Kings.
Yeah, that is in Jason's wheelhouse. So
not Path of Exile, but.
And I'll admit, when Boji talks this first scene, I was like, oh no, they're gonna kill me.
Yeah.
I had that thought. Yes.
Yeah. That was the Tanya moment where she's like, what the heck is this? Troy picked this. I know he picked this.
All right, so our boy Boji, we see him out and about exploring the countryside, and he comes across what looks like a blob in the shape of the number 8. And there's an eye in each circle, and hands can grow out, and a mouth can grow out. But this is actually a creature of this world. They're called the Shadow Clan. They are usually assassins, but this one is the thief, and his name is Kage. And he holds Boji, he mugs him basically, and takes all his clothes because they're nice, richly printed clothes. So he takes those so he can sell them. And this is our second main character, and soon to be Boji's best friend. And I'm sure we have a lot of thoughts about this as well. So thoughts on Kage?
Jeremy, you go first.
So I think Kage has an interesting backstory, and I definitely want to know, like, what is he? I don't know if the anime is actually going to answer that question. I know he may just be like any of the other monster races. Like, this is just what he is. Deal with it. But it is mentioned that he has a curse on him, and I'm curious because that seems to not be something that's a curse on all of the Shadow Clan. I got the impression it was unique to him, and it was a divine curse. My initial thought is there's a scene in his flashback where somebody casts a spell by standing up and saying, white, and he happens to be running away and gets caught in the light. So I'm suspicious that maybe that was the curse, but maybe not. Maybe it's something entirely different that we haven't been shown yet. As far as his relationship with Boji goes, I think Jason kind of hit it on the head that because we can't understand Boji and Kage acts as his mouthpiece, I was really kind of like bored with him a lot. But at the same time, there were plenty of moments where he was pivotal. He was important to have around. He saved Boji's life. At the same time, like, one of those seemed a little bit contrived, at least. That's the one with the bandit and where the bag happened to land in the forest. Unless maybe he just slithered it over to that location.
Yeah. That's what he did.
Is that what he did? Because I got the impression the bandit was there at that spot when it was dropped. But maybe not.
I thought in the flashback they showed the bandit was still in town.
Oh, really? I thought he was in a forest.
No, he was exiting town. He was on that trail, and then he got scared and dropped the bag on the trail.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
And then Boji came across the bag when
You don't
they
think Kage
started
moved the
leaving.
bag at all?
I don't think the bag moved, but I could be
Yeah.
wrong. But there were no scenes where it showed Kage moving the bag.
I guess I just assumed he
And
Yeah.
easily be
This
able
doesn't
to
have
walk
any.
around.
Kage doesn't have anything to do with ninjas, right?
Well,
Okay,
I mean,
Kage. Come on, these are the jokes,
Hokage?
people.
yeah, other than that, it was interesting to see at one point where he's actually questioning and criticizing Boji during and after the training a little bit. It shows that there's a little bit more of a complex relationship that they have where, yeah, he's in his court on his side or whatever, but at the same time, he's willing to make his own judgment calls, even if he does wind up retracting them. And I kind of hope that they do more with that. I hope that there's more of an opportunity where Kage, like, has his own opinion that doesn't necessarily harmonize with Boji, and the two maybe have a falling out or something. I don't know. I want there to be something more interesting happening between them instead of just like, yeah, we're in agreement all the time, and we're best buddies, and everything's great between us. Also, I really thought that Kage was going to be an important, like, defense character because he's a monster. I thought he was going to be the one defending Boji. That rarely happens, if ever. He seems to be at about the same power level as Boji.
I honestly thought there was gonna be like a fusion technique thing going on, and like I'll wrap around you, and then now you have power. Yeah.
Yeah.
He was okay. I mean, he's the buddy character. But I did feel he was the Deus Ex Machina mouthpiece of Boji. I actually was getting into him sneaking around the castle and what the dude with the snake dude, is that
Bebin.
Bebin.
Names are a bit weird in this.
I know.
To be fair.
I like their interactions. And we'll get more into that when we get to that scene. But yeah, I don't know. Just felt buddy kind of character. He didn't impact me much. I just yeah.
The emotional strength
Okay, here we go.
listening.
This is why he's the best character in all of anime.
The emotional strength I get when Boji sees that Kage is proud of him, and just the facial animation they did on Boji, that moment of like, good job, Boji, and just like no one's ever told Boji that. I agree, he's mostly just a mouthpiece. He's not too complex of a character. His backstory is interesting, and I think it does give a really good cement reason why these two become best friends, especially from his side. Like, Boji, hey, I have someone who actually gives me agency and likes me and just wants to help me do the things that I want to do for the first time in my life. Yeah, you're my best friend. That's great. But why does Kage like him? Showing the flashback of, hey, kid, your entire purpose is to serve a king. Oh yeah, the king betrayed us, and everyone you've ever loved, or anyone you love after that, betrays you. And now there's finally someone worthy of your loyalty. And so he's finally found that purpose in life he never got to have. So I get what Kage is going through. Their friendship to me is one of the strongest pieces of this anime. The way they work together. Again, I thought they were going to be more of like a tag team fighting duo, and maybe that's in the future, and maybe not. But yeah, whenever Kage says, Boji, good job, and Boji just looks like his head's going to explode with happiness, I can barely handle it. And so I'm glad the character, he is on lower tier for me of favorite characters. I don't think he's really a standout, but their friendship to me is, so I have no issues with it. All right. And we have a lot of characters, so I'm probably going to go pretty fast through the story recap. This robbing the kid of his clothes happens multiple times a day on purpose. Boji keeps wearing more and more clothes to bring this guy just so he can have someone to talk to. And eventually, Kage follows him into town, sees people mocking him, and Boji acts like he can't tell that people are mocking him, but we learn later he reads lips and he knows everything they're saying. Then when Boji gets back to the castle for the third day in a row, mostly naked, we meet a bunch of characters that we have to talk about. But I want to start with the queen, who sees her stepson, and she's his stepmother, and is like, oh, he's naked again. I can't handle this kid. He's going to be the king, and I can't handle that. It just seems like just a very stereotypical, tropey stepmom. Mm-hmm. And we do not get that. So what do you guys think of Queen Hyaline?
Shit. Inconsistency is the best word I can...
Called complex characters, not inconsistency.
Complex... Okay. Yeah, when we first meet her, she's like, oh, my son needs to be king, even though he's the youngest, and he's not chosen, but he needs to be king because he's my son, and he's more capable.
Yes.
But, you know, and then later on, we're like, oh, she shows him a lot of favoritism because she wanted to get close to him because she's stepmom, trying to win his affection, healing him, but then she's... You know, when she thinks that Boji's dead, she goes into a rage. I guess you could call that complex, but the way it's presented just felt like almost like two different people from the first couple episodes to the rest of the anime.
So you didn't get the impression in those flashbacks that she was genuine in her affection for Boji?
Oh, no, I did. But what I'm saying is the first like 3 episodes, she's just not the same person as she is the rest of the anime.
I don't know. I saw enough outbursts later to see that she was essentially the kind of character that she's very controlling. She's very quick to make statements and decisions and jump.
And blunt. She's blunt.
Mm-hmm, very blunt. And so I kind of saw it as, you know, we were only seeing her in the situations where she was going to call things out and be blunt in those first 3 episodes. And we weren't given that insight into, you know, maybe her wondering if she came on too hard later, which probably happened. So, because the anime does do that quite a few times, where it presents you a certain image of characters, a perspective, and then it shifts that perspective later, and you're like, oh, okay, so these characters, that was just one side of them. It wasn't the whole thing. So I didn't have the same. I didn't come away with the same issues with her. I actually really liked her as a character as soon as she healed him, because I was like, okay, there's more to this character. She's not just the stereotypical horrible stepmother. Because we were, Tanya and I were sitting there talking about, like, what are you getting from this? You're getting vibes. What vibes are you getting from this? And she was like, oh, this is like all of the, all of the fairy tales. Right? You got Snow White, you got Cinderella, you get, like, at some points there's Pinocchio. Like, it's got all of them in there. And so she was the evil mother in all of those, in those first 3 episodes. So she fit very well. But then seeing that there's a little bit more to her was really cool.
Yeah, the fact that her actions aren't based on trying to just help her son and hurt Boji. It's actually based on loving Boji so much and being so worried about him, but not believing in him, that she's actually hurting him and making his life harder, not even fully realizing it. But she's not a good person. The guy comes back, he's like, hey, I'm sorry, I was supposed to protect your son, and he died. I am tearing you piece to piece. She's ready to stab the body of her own child to rescue her child. Like,
very impulsive.
She's impulsive. She's a capital B.
Yes.
But she has a genuine love and compassion for this character, and that's where I found the complexity of her, is that, you know, she has some of the tropes of the horrible stepmother, but she has a love that's not almost never there in that trope, and how that affected her decisions. And like Jeremy pointed out, that's so many characters. We get, hey, they are this way. Actually, there's a reason they're that way, and there's motivations, but that's not the only way they are. There's all these different. Bevan's one. Bosse.
Bevan majorly comes to mind when you talk about that.
And the scene where she's trying to win over Boji, the first flashback, which I do think this anime overuses flashbacks, but with the first flashback of her trying to win over Boji, I was like, oh, this is great. This is so good. I've never seen this before with the stepmom in castle. But then she was still against Boji, so I enjoyed her.
It felt like the way that she was against him outside of the flashbacks and later, like in the latter half of this first season, were very relatable. Like, she was the mother hen being very protective of him. And I didn't actually have any issue. Like, I didn't see that she was being so bitchy to him anymore. Whoops.
Oh, whoops.
Just kind of popped out.
Yeah, I mean, she's actively trying to make him not the king, but will also dive out of a window and die to save him.
Yeah.
That's just who she is. And I don't think those are contrasting. I think the anime did a good job of presenting why she could do both those things and keep it consistent, to me.
Complexity, inconsistency, tomato.
It's a thin line. I'll give you that. It's a very thin line. All right. Also there we have the sword tutor for Boji, Domas. Quick thoughts on him.
I thought this was a interesting character. It's funny. I like him and I don't, because he wants to be loyal and he wants to be a good servant and a good, protector, if you will, but he's also willing to follow orders that he knows are morally incorrect. And then he just absolutely, it destroys him. And then when he gets his redemption arc, or at least what he believes is redemption, he jumps at it. I don't know. I found his complexity compelling instead of, never mind. Leave it at that.
Instead of annoying.
That's fair. Look, it's not like anyone's opinion is better than anybody else's. Your opinion is
Except
completely
mine.
valid. Jeremy, what you think?
So, Domus, he had some really, really cool things about his character. Like, there's moments where you can hear the mental break, because he's like, he'll just start laughing maniacally when there's no reason to laugh. And, that's the sign in a lot of anime where this character's done. He's had as much as he can take mentally. And he becomes sort of a Jaime Lannister, just in the, like, hand sense. But the one issue that I had with him that kept happening is he would change his... It seemed like he jumped through his arc very quick. And I know he's not done with it, but just jumping from phase to phase as he transitions through it. So, for instance, there's a scene where he's essentially punishing himself because of something that he did. And it's a very drastic punishment. Chopping off his own hand. And then, like, in the next episode, he's talking about getting a new hand so that he can wield his sword again. And so what happened, where is the body, the weight of that action, that self-punishment, if you're already looking in the next episode to take it away and get rid of that punishment? I have a little issue with that. Other than that, I really liked the character, and I think that the key with him is that he is a coward, and one of the characters calls him out on it, and his arc is going to be resolving that cowardice, getting over it.
To me, Damas is Diet Shao Tucker from Full Metal Alchemist, because he's in a situation where he's screwed no matter which way he goes. He's ordered to assassinate Boji, but he's also sworn to protect him, and both of them will screw him over. And he goes forward with the assassination, whereas Shao Tucker was, in the end, I had to go with the science. This guy, what I find interesting about him is how disappointed he is that he had to be Boji's teacher. Like, he loves Boji, he learns sign language for Boji, but there's a part of him that very much resents Boji, because Boji won't ever be the powerful, he'll never get to say, I trained the most powerful king. As he's watching Daida, excel at swordsmanship with this other guy, and he's like, well, I got stuck with the lame duck.
Maybe
And
that's
I think that informs his decisions when he eventually makes his choice.
Maybe that's the problem I have with the anime, because the anime consistently hits you over the head with, here's stereotypical medieval storytelling, but these things are also strength that don't look like strength, like empathy, or hitting critical strikes with soft hits, or coming at something that maybe with agility instead of raw strength. It's always on the nose of, because we have multiple characters that are like, this is beneath my skills, but they're very important jobs, like, guarding the queen. But why are you taking me away from this? And then, the point has to be, why is this a lesser job? It's not. It's a great job. That seems to be a very consistent theme throughout multiple things that are constantly being thrown at the viewer.
Mm.
I think it's important to the world, and I think that's what Boji's whole thing, I think, is upsetting the whole idea that this world hinges on, which is we can rank. We have a ranking system. And I think the point of especially of Boji, is that...
Do we, though?
That ranking system is dumb.
You've heard about it. But he's not calling it dumb, though. He's trying to abide by it and prove himself like number one in that ranking system.
I refuse to accept that.
Yeah, he's...
But also, like, the whole premise of the show is to become the strongest, I had to do something evil. So it's like strength equals evil, and then empathy equals better. And
what a horrible
that's
theme
true.
for an anime to have. Yeah, it's a fairy tale fantasy world. That's the kind of stuff they do. That's a very on. I feel like that's very on brand.
Sure. I mean, you look at just about any shonen, that's not particularly true for them, but I don't know. It was very heavy-handed. I think if it was a little more subtle, I think it would have come off better for me. But that's my taste.
All right. Also, there is Bebin. We need to talk about Bebin. He is the tutor of Prince Daida.
He was in the show for 10 minutes.
And yet has super amount of influence on the plot.
Right.
So we could do quick thoughts on him. What do you think about him really quickly?
I want to see more of him. I think he's super interesting because he's again one of these characters who conflicted about his loyalties, right? And he seems to be much more loyal to the idea of the kingdom than he is the individual people within the realm and what he believes is best for the realm. At least that's what it seems, right? But he gets stabbed real quick. But I love his interactions with Kage. Like, he could have immediately dispatched Kage at any moment. He even threatened him multiple times that, you're going to die. And instead ends up signing him on as an undercover spy for him. But, yeah, I'm excited to learn more about him in the next.
Mm-hmm. Bevin was kind of a sleeper for me. Like, he came out of nowhere that he was so cool. When I first saw him, I thought, oh, okay, so this is the bad guy, right? Mm-hmm. Among the king's men. He's got the Chris, he's got the creepy mustache, he's got the big bisected chin, right? Cleft chin.
It's everywhere.
Everything he's got is like villain. And then he's also hiding out in the shadows all the time. And big spiders start crawling up my wall. Oof.
Welcome to the show, Big Spider.
Yes. Fourth Baka today. So he was a really interesting character because, you see this, and then you see this other character that's the spearman, and you're like, okay, so that guy's the quiet, dignified one. He makes a good decision, gets banished from the kingdom, and now the bad guy's coming up to kill him, and then the bad guy gets stabbed. And you're like, I did not see that coming. So the way that they used Bebin and they kind of played on your expectations and subverted them was really cool. And then, had him stick around when it seemed like he was dead after that. I see him as a beastmaster, basically, because the more I was thinking about it, it's not just snakes. He seems to be okay with, like, I bet you that's part of why he was fine with Kage. is he's probably a monster guy. Like, likes the monsters. So I definitely want to see more of him. I want to know what his goal is.
You know, it seems he's dedicated to Daida, but believes that helping Boji will ultimately serve that.
Exactly. Yeah. And I don't know how.
Yeah, I actually almost everything Jeremy said. I was like, oh, here's our villain, and then they twist that, and that's one of the things that made me fall in love with this show.
Mm-hmm.
The character twisty. All right. After putting some clothes on, and Kage is still following him around. Kage runs into Bebin. That's actually how we met Bebin. As he finds Kage sneaking around, and he's like, "Okay, well, I'm gonna catch you. I know what you are. You're an assassin. You're from the Assassin Clan.
Who sent you and who are you trying to kill?"
We see Boji have to go talk to his dad, who's sick in bed and is also a giant. Like, Boji has to climb up onto his footstool, and it looks like a giant bed to him. Just the footstool of this man. That's how big he is. And so I thought, hey, there's the king. Guess we won't talk about him very long. But it turns out we need to. King Bosse, your guys' thoughts?
I'm very interested in this story. Like, this is guy who sold his soul to the devil, if you will, to become the strongest, made a very prosperous kingdom, and now all of that is starting to catch up with him. And watching Boji's, well, we don't get to see Boji being birthed, but that scene where he's born, and we realize that, you know, what that contract meant. I find this character fascinating. Now that he's back, I'm really interested to see how that gets resolved. It seems like he's got a scheme of his own to subvert the demon. But that whole relationship and Miranjo, which we'll get into later, that whole that's the heart of this story, and we don't even get a taste of it until like episode 9. Anyways,
I thought you liked slow burners. I like slow burners.
I like slow burners that like introduce the ideas early and like talk about them as we go.
That's
not
good.
Oh, by the way, this whole story hinges on this one thing at episode 9. It's like, okay, thanks.
So I absolutely love the king as a character. He is fascinating. Like Jason said, I love the fact that he made a terrible decision, and it looks to me like he regrets the decision. And it looks to me like he started to regret it the moment Boji was born. And so there's even a point where he says, "So I've sacrificed another son." You know? At first I was thinking, oh, he's done this generation after, and then I was like, oh, no, he's talking about Daida. Okay. And it was me reading way too much into it. But yeah, seeing how it's unfolding, and now it seems like there's 3 major plots going on, and I definitely want to see what he's planning to do, and just how much strength he still has. And yeah, he's a very well done character.
I love that he makes a diamond out of a club.
Yeah. And that's like his trademark move with her. He's like, hey, remember this?
Are you hot now?
Exactly.
Just doing it for you. I don't there's really much to add except to echo what you guys have said. The scene where he says, "So I've sacrificed a second son," and I'm like, "Oh, you're the worst. You did this to Boji. You're the one who made him so weak. I'm on to you. You're the worst." And then we get his flashback of him coming home, seeing Boji, and being like, I'm setting aside this warrior life. I've done this kid wrong. I'm going to give him the best life possible. I have to make this right. Don't make me like you. I think that's the worst. And now I'm sitting here like, everything he does, I'm scrutinizing. Oh, whose side are you on? Are you playing both sides? Are you on no one's side? We'll get into it, but he knows an assassination is coming, warns the guard the assassination is coming, but does nothing to stop the assassination, Or did he? Because there was 4 assassin monsters.
That's
He just
right.
happened to randomly kill one just for fun.
Yep.
And I'm like, oh, there's layers to this. I gotta keep an eye on this guy. Yeah, he's one of the most fascinating parts of the storytelling. But to contrast, Jason, the slow burn story of how his character comes back into the story, that whole room, the spell, the drink, all of that, I wouldn't change a moment of that. I was fascinated every second of the way.
Yeah, Daida's like manipulation, I thought was really good, and like taking advantage of his, like he didn't in his flashbacks. We come to find out he wasn't so gung ho for the throne until he started becoming manipulated.
Yeah.
So again, we've got a bunch of people, nice people who have good intentions that end up getting twisted. So I'll definitely give the story that. In fact, I find Daida to be one of the more compelling, bratty characters I've seen in quite some time.
Yeah.
Like because his brattiness is taken advantage of for storytelling purposes on multiple occasions, where they're able to teach a really compelling lesson. So
it's time to talk about Daida, because the next scene is him having a sparring session with Domas. He loses, even though he had said he recently beat Bebin. But he does lose to Domas, and then Boji wants to fight him, and that's where our first episode ends, as this fight starts. So we meet Prince Daida. Your guys' thoughts on him?
I hated him at first. I thought, again, stereotypical.
Joffrey Reborn.
Yep.
Yeah. Stereotypical younger prince trying to sneak his way into the throne. There's a scene further on into the anime where he's just in this blackness for an unspecified amount of time, where he seems to, not experience hunger or tiredness. So like he's been awake for days. And he starts having like these existential like experiences, and it's really well written, especially for somebody who was being manipulated, but then was pivotal in that manipulation to get himself to the throne. And that was I thought this was a good character.
It's like he was an effective pawn.
Right.
You move him around, but he's doing a lot of the work himself. Totally got Joffrey vibes, but he grew on me a lot once he started. The moment that he said, "I'm such a fool," I was like, "Okay, you have a chance. There's hope for you yet." But yeah, one of the things I really like about this show in general is that the characters act more like what you would expect from a real person. And you don't normally get that with shows. So, for instance, there was a moment where he was asked to drink something, and there was a whole big ceremony of getting it prepared and having it ready for him, and he's suspicious. And in a normal story, you'd be like, yeah, he's suspicious, and he's going to voice his suspicions, but he's going to do it anyways. And then he doesn't. He doesn't. It's like when you're watching the scary movie and you tell the characters, don't split up. They didn't split up, right? So then the story has to find some other way to get to where it needs to be, because the character is actually rebelling against the normal flow of the story. And I liked that a lot. And he did that there. There were a couple other characters that did it at other times as well, where they made decisions or things happened. Sometimes it wasn't necessarily even just the character making a decision, but things happened that seemed more realistic and more interesting and just not where you expected the story to go. So, yeah.
Yep. A character that, again, I was like, you are the worst.
Yeah.
I said that about a couple of characters and then ended up being like, stupid anime tricking me.
Yeah.
What I love most about him rejecting the drink that we'll get to is that it was because I want to do this on my own. Yeah, I'm tempted to have this power boost and this shortcut, But no, I have pride. I'm not just a spoiled pissant. I want to do this on my own and become the high-ranking king that I plan to be, but I want to get there through my own means. And
Oh my god, is he Vegeta?
he's a little Vegeta, yeah, isn't he?
He's got a little Vegeta. I have my Saiyan pride.
He even does like some roundhouse kicks on those guards too.
Yeah, he does.
All right. So when Daida and Boji fight, we learn that Boji has this one skill, and it's dodge. Gohan could have used it.
Dodge.
That is a reference for a very select group of people.
Yep.
But yeah, he is the dodgeball champion of the world. You can't hit him. And like I mentioned, you know, this fight's a big deal. People are like, oh, the two princes are fighting. This has never happened. And people are like, huh, Boji's kind of a cheater. You know, he's getting hits, but nothing happens to Daida because Boji's so weak, it doesn't do any damage. And
So it
people are
looks like he's just humiliating him.
yeah, it looks like he's mocking him, and he's losing the opinion war there. And Domas comes up to him and signs to him, no more dodging. And Daida beats this kid and like breaks his arm.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's gonna kill him. And it's another guy, Apius, the spear master, comes down and stops the fight. And he's like, Domas is like, no, I had to let him beat him mostly to death.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm like, oh, Domas, I don't think I like you. I don't think you're as good as your initial character representation showed. But this is when I got suspicious of the man, because that was rough.
There's also something to consider about his particular sword technique. They describe it as a strength sword technique, where essentially he's not interested in training you how to be quick. He is interested in training you how to be strong. So if you can't be strong, you cannot do his sword technique, period. There's no amount of training that would ever let you do it, because as another character says later, you don't know how to train. You just demonstrate. And you tell people, well, just do this.
Do what I do, but it doesn't work because I'm not at your level.
Exactly. And so when he does sign that and he says, this is not how kings fight,
Right.
it kind of made sense to me, because the only way that he respects a king, because he said that he built that technique off of King Boss, watching how King Boss fights. And so the only thing he respects that a king should do is cross swords and overpower the opponent. Dodging it's dishonorable. Which is so funny, because in real life, you should always dodge.
And he says his fighting style is based on King Boss's style, right? He copied Boss's strength style.
Mm-hmm.
What I have a bit of a confession with the sign language. I remember I kept thinking, like, I don't know enough about sign language to recognize that this is accurate sign language in the anime, and I kept watching the signs, and then I realized even if I knew sign language, it wouldn't matter, because Japanese sign language is not American sign language.
Not ASL, exactly.
It's a completely different sign language, so wouldn't matter if I did. But I gotta say, I don't know if I've ever seen sign language presented like this in an anime, and I did really appreciate that. Like you said, cousin who's deaf, uncle deaf, and so sign language is in our family, even though I only know the alphabet.
Yeah.
If you couldn't tell from the intro.
Yeah.
I still struggle with G and P.
Yeah.
All right. Yep. In the second episode, we get Kage's flashback, which is basically, you know, his clan of assassins were betrayed by their king, and he basically committed genocide on them. Little Kage was spared thanks to a young princess's help, and he got away and started living with this guy who abused him and treated him badly, but that's all he knew as, you know, a family. And he trained him to be a thief, and then the guy sold him out. And then Kage goes back to him because that's all he has. That part was rough. And then this guy gets killed in a bar fight, and like Kage's there in the bar trying to be like, "Don't die, don't die." And the guy cries after he sees Kage, realizes how horrible it's been. Okay, that's
I
heavy.
didn't see that as realizing how horrible he's been. I just saw that as like, his kidneys are relaxing and that's manifesting through his eyes tearing up and
Maybe.
Oh my god.
Because that's how that works.
So Kage became a thief, basically.
Yeah. Trained well, apparently.
Yep. Kage meets up with Boji, and after he's been pummeled, and basically tells him, I want to be in your corner. I'm going to serve you. You're going to be my king. And they both cry.
Was that little girl Moranjo?
I don't think so.
My daughter asked the same thing. The timeline seems a bit off because Moranjo was with Base long before Boji was born, and I'm guessing Kage is older than Boji, but probably not by a lot.
Yeah, you're probably right.
But they did both have black hair, curly hair, and it wouldn't, based on what we know about the kingdom Kage is from, I wouldn't put it past them.
Yeah.
All right, we see somebody heal Boji. We're gonna find out later it's Queen Hyaline. I love her healing power, and that it just beats the crap out of her. So she has to get like foot massages whenever she does it.
Or she's
like
got a drink.
Chugging the mana potions like alcohol. Yeah, it's awesome.
Kage gets captured by Bebin, and then we have the scene where the king dies, and Boji's declared in his will to be the new king. And then a demon emerges from the king's body, points at Boji, and then disappears.
Yep.
That's when I was
cool.
into the anime. I'm like, yep, I'm in. I'm all in.
Yep.
That's awesome. That's just so creepy and dark. What just happened?
Yep. That is to me what felt like Brothers Grimm, the start of a Brothers Grimm tale.
Okay. See, that gives me Dark Souls vibe for some reason. Like, hey, here's this random thing. Here's a giant monster just randomly appearing.
Well, it didn't kill the player right away, so.
However, when they read the will to the people, it's been changed, and Daida is named king. And we find out that all these council members and the queen had a late night discussion of, hey, we can't have Boji be the king. Also, did that demon just point at him? Probably he shouldn't be the king. We don't know what that demon meant. And so they change it and make Daida the king. Boji's very upset. Meanwhile,
and this is in the background. Daida's been having his magic mirror tell him that he's gonna be king. And then when the will is read, he's like concerned, like, they named Boji. What's going on? And she's like, no, this is part of the plan. So it's interesting just how much influence this person in the mirror is having on the kingdom.
Yeah.
We see Kage escape by literally cutting off part of his body, but getting caught again. And he tells Bebin, like, I just want to help Boji. And he's like, wait, what? So then Bebin tells Boji, hey, Kage? Well, I sent him away. He's not going to be around anymore. He says goodbye.
Oh, and he doesn't actually say I sent him away, so it makes it seem
you're right.
like Kage left.
Yeah, he just left, right. Boji tries to figure out what happened and eventually talks to a giant, what should be a three-headed snake, but one of the heads is missing. They only have one eye between all of them. And Boji goes and talks to the snake, and the snake's like, I love you, Boji, you're the best, but I gotta help Bebin. I can't tell you too much. Look, Kage's safe, he went on a journey. That's all I can tell you. And I was like, what is happening?
Right, this is like out of the blue.
Yeah. And here is where the anime is telling me, oh, did Bebin put out the creature's eyes? Did Bebin cut the head off the snake? Is that because it calls him his master, right? So I was like, Bebin's a terrible master, like, to have done this. Of course he didn't.
So also at the same time, Daida is like, hey, he's talking with the mirror, and they're like, we should get rid of the people who voted against you becoming the king when that council met. So he orders Bebin to kill Abius, and we get kind of, besides the sparring fight that we'd already seen, this is our first real big fight, and it's a beauty. Bebin versus Apius, the whole vibrating the spear to get him off of it so that he can then stab him. And Bevan loses and gets stabbed in the chest and then disappears into the ground. And we're not going to, like you guys mentioned, we're not going to see him for a while.
I thought that he became one of the two servants that was with Miranjo.
We don't know who that is, do we?
Mm-mm.
This is where Boji asked the queen to go on his journey, and after falling out of his tower and miraculously surviving it, she finally relents and sends him with Domas and a soldier who is a friend of Boji's because they both have mothers who died, and Boji had consoled him once. So he's a big fan of Boji. He's also the only guy who knows how well he could dodge because he saw him dodging snakes. That was training. Holy moly. Just realized
And he
that.
knows. Yeah, that was training.
I was like, why was he attacked by snakes? Oh, he wasn't, was he? He got trained.
Uh-huh. And the guy is also the only soldier that knows sign language.
Yeah, that's right. That's another reason I sent him. His name is Hokuro. He does have a bit of arc, but we've already had so many characters, I'm going to skip him for the most part.
Fairly inconsequential character.
Mm-hmm. He's more of like acting as a catalyst for Domas to do the right thing.
Yeah, he's the Jiminy Cricket to Domas.
Mm-hmm.
We get the flashback of Hilda meeting Boji and how they ended up bonding because this weird three-headed snake attacked Boji and she kicked it away, but then Boji cried and they healed it and saved it and took care of it for a while. Answering the big question from earlier in this episode, when is Boji best friends with a giant three-headed snake? And yeah, so they leave on their journey.
Did it become giant because it bit Boji?
That'd be dope if that was true.
Did it actually bite him though?
Yeah.
It did.
Yeah, it had him by the hand.
Did you see any blood?
I don't remember blood, but he was crying as if he was in pain. So
Because I thought we saw blood when it bit Beben later.
I didn't pay attention to either to be able to tell you.
Yeah.
That would be really cool though if that's what it was.
We get a flashback of Domas becoming Boji's teacher.
Wow, another flashback?
Yeah, like I said, that might be my only complaint. The flashbacks serve good purposes, but because every character matters and every action matters, they have to take a lot of time to stop the story, look at a flashback to set things up. Almost full shonen style. Like, there's not even a battle though to do the flashback in. Just, no, we gotta do more flashbacks. So that is a bit of a thing. The King Ranker comes to judge Daida. Daida gets only 90th place among kings, very low.
Which begs the question, like, how many kingdoms are in this world?
And the kingdoms seem really small. They all seem like city-states.
They basically say, like, if a guy starts doing good stuff and a village is like, hey, you're the king, that's how you become a king. There's no, like, actual anything to it. It's just, yeah, people say, you're cool, you're the king, that's all you need.
It's also funny that the king gets judged immediately. Like, he doesn't have time to train or anything like that. If you get the crown, we need to know what you are. So, Bosse was 7th, but this ranker does say he was the physically strongest of all the kings. And if he had been better at managing his kingdom, he might have been higher. The mirror wants Daida to assassinate Boji. That'll come up later. We also learn about what the ranking matters for. Apparently, there is some kind of divine vault of goodies.
Yeah.
And if you get rank 1, you get to take something from it.
But then they, like, disappear.
Yeah, because they always pick the same thing and then disappear.
Ah, that is going to be important.
Mm-hmm.
It's like Indiana Jones.
I know. I was thinking of the chalice too.
We get Boji reaching a village where he wanders off to go watch a puppet show, and then he takes a nap in the middle of the village, and he gets his bag robbed, and Domas yells at him and Hokuro for doing that, and then they keep traveling on and they find the bag again. They're lucky they have everything.
Well, they weren't too concerned with the contents of the bag, except the bag had the recommendation letter, which is the whole reason they're out on this journey.
Yep.
This next part is probably one of my favorites. I know we talked in pre-show about favorite parts, but this is probably my favorite part. This montage of traveling. This is where like a monster goes by and they're just shown hiding behind a tree because, hey, monsters sometimes go by. And then we see Boji fall into a spike trap and then there's a cave inside there and he finds this old guy who
was like Samurai Jack all of a sudden.
Right.
Like, that's so weird.
I love this part, and it is weird. It's bizarre. It doesn't have anything to do with anything, and I think that's my favorite part about it.
And we never revisit it.
No, we don't.
That's why I love it. It doesn't explain it. It felt to me like this was good world building, but I'll explain it in a second.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, did he find fantasy Rick Sanchez in a cave?
And this guy has a crown, so I'm thinking he's a king. He's like, hey, come eat my boar with me. So they go up on a mountain and they cook this boar. And before they eat, they see this giant black cloud start sucking up the souls of all the animals that have been killed and hunted, and then regurgitating them back out into the world. And he teaches him the dance of reconciliation, where it's a thank you and an apology to the animals for letting us kill you and eat you so that they can do it again later. And they do this and they start eating. And then the guy looks at Boji. He's like, I think I'm going to eat you next. And Boji just has to run. And when he does, he runs into Domas and Hokuro. And he's like, we got to go. Let's go away. Mm-hmm. And we never come back to it. And to me, this was the idea that there's nothing evil in this world. There's just eat or be eaten in this world. You serve your goals, you go after your objectives, and you hurt people when you do that, and you try to reconcile, but you're going to do it again. And that felt very much in line with all of these servants and Domas and Bebin and all these guys that we're seeing making choices that some hurt others and some help others. So to me, this was, I love this scene.
I
so
loved it
random.
because of its randomness, and because, like I said, the art style of this guy it's so reminiscent of Samurai Jack to me, and the way he moves and everything. Like, his eyes are almost vertical. Like, I've never seen him draw a character like this in anime. And his head is super, super narrow. Like, they make him look feral. And
it looks like something I'd see on Adult Swim.
Yes.
Like,
yeah, it just didn't belong. It was almost like he entered into a whole nother realm in his own world. Very weird.
With the next scene is that we see them eating food, and right before Boji eats his food, some knives fly into it, and he has to drop it, and these foxes take it, and they're like, oh, there's an assassin nearby. And Domas goes out, and he's like, these are Bebin's knives. Bebin, are you around? I know it was you. What are you doing out here? But no one answers. And then the next day they're traveling, and they see the foxes are dead, and they're like, oh, those knives must have had poison in them. And I'm like, yeah. No. Someone's lying. And then they get to a city that's it's the city at the edge of hell. And I'm like, oh, that's a weird name for, oh no, literally, hell's right. There's a hole. And then he's like, and Domas is like, Hokuro, you go to town. Hey, Boji, why don't you come look into this edge of hell with me? Just peer over the edge, push.
Yep.
And yeah, you kind of saw it coming by this point.
Yeah.
It was really, but yeah, they go the full 10 yards, and he pushes them off. He was ordered by Daida to do so, and this is the scene where he starts like laughing hysterically and crying and just kind of having a mental breakdown.
Yeah. This was cool. It was a very interesting beat, and I'm glad that they had him go through with it, because you usually don't see that. Usually the character would pull back at the last minute.
I had already said this show was giving me Game of Thrones vibe to you guys before I saw this episode, and then I saw this episode and was like, wow, that is just really PG Game of Thrones. It's
basically the Brandon scene.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
We get a scene of Daida having a dream of opening Pandora's box, and all these horrible things happening to him, and then Hope emerges from the box, and it's Boji, and Boji is going to be his savior.
And it's a super tiny Boji that keeps like leaping around trying to block things and getting the crap beat out of him.
Very, very much a foreshadowing that this show does multiple times of like Boji is important to Daida being saved.
Mm-hmm.
Then we see Daida. You okay, man? There's a mute button, you know.
Yep, my bad.
No worries. We see Daida decide, okay, I am going to get my father's strength because of the ranking and this dream. So he takes the mirror and they go down into a crypt. So then we kind of bounce between these two stories. So the crypt scene, let's just kind of run through that first, and then we'll go back to Boji. There's a room full of mythical monsters that are all frozen, as well as the king's body. And the mirror's like, okay, now you're ready. And there's these two guards down there, purple guy and pink guy.
Mm-hmm.
And
Then they make King Smoothie.
They make king smoothies. They literally have this giant blender blades beneath the king and drop his frozen body in, and then this goo comes out. And my son is like, what's happening? Oh, don't tell your mom. We lost it.
Don't tell your mom.
And I'm like, okay, this is getting even more hardcore than I thought it would.
Yeah.
And then they take him into a room where they basically do a spell with sunlight and create a phoenix. They don't even call it a phoenix. They don't even say this is a phoenix, but, you know, it is. And they create an egg, and it hatches and turns into a giant monster. They cut off its head and burn its body and take its jewel of resurrection, and they throw it into the drink. And they're like, okay, now drink this, and you'll get the king's power. And Daida says no. And they're like, okay, well, we're going to make you. And he's like, nope, I can do karate now. And he fights off the two guards, and then we'll come back to that in a little bit. Meanwhile, Boji's alive because his bag saved him, because Kage's been in his bag the entire time. Literally the entire time. When he fell out of the tower back at home, Kage was in there and caught him. That's the reason he didn't die.
Which is silly because Kage is like flat, so I don't know what kind of cushion he was.
Maybe he just made the bag the cushion and aimed the bag.
That makes sense. There you go.
And he had been tasked by Bebin to protect Boji, and it was his knives that stopped Boji from eating the poison meat that Domas had already poisoned. So this was the second murder attempt, obviously. Mm-hmm. And he's like, hey, we're gonna keep going down into hell because there's someone who can train us down there. But when they go down, they find dead bodies, and this gas comes, and they try to run from the gas, but they can't. It knocks them out, but it doesn't kill them because apparently they're already cursed. Yeah, which is a very important plot point. Then Hakuro finds out from Domas what happened. Domas is like, yeah, I kind of assassinated him, and they have a fight, which Domas easily wins, but he
loses a hand.
He got his hand half cut off, and then he takes it off the rest of the way himself.
But it really looked like Damas put his hand in the way of the blade on purpose.
Right. Instead of using his own sword, he...
Yeah. And he's like, cut through it! Cut all the way through!
Yeah. So, I mean, it's really clear that what he's doing is, like, he's trying to put the blame for what he just did because his conscience is weighing so heavily on something. So he's picked a body part. The hand
that pushed him, yep.
Yeah, he's like, I just got to cut this body part off, and then I'll be free of this guilt. But it doesn't work like that. I mean, only for psychos. It doesn't work like that.
All right, so Boji and Kage are taken by the Knights of the Underworld, who are known as the most powerful military that any of the kings have. And because their entire job is, hey, we live in hell, and any time a monster leaves hell, we have to go out and bring it back. So
okay, I've been waiting for this because this made me laugh so hard. They show a demonstration of, or an example of, like, what they mean when they say that a monster leaves hell. It's literally just a monster like climbs up out of that hole, gets up, looks around, and jauntily
Goes
kind
to
of,
market.
like, goes to market, buys some bread, pays for the bread, turns around with its groceries, and the
It gets
guards show up and they're
eviscerated.
just like, just eviscerating him, just destroying him. I was laughing so hard because I was like, everybody was presenting this image of these guards as like protecting from a hellmouth where demons and spawn are just coming up and destroying things and ravaging people everywhere. Nope, they just wanted to buy some bread at the local grocery bazaar.
And come to find out later, like, this is just a normal society. They just happen to look like
Yes.
monsters.
Yes.
Like, this is every other isekai world down there.
Mhm. And some of them apparently are even, I got the impression they're guards, because there's a point later where Despa's interacting with
Yeah.
one and it
I
looks
think
like
the
he's
guards
a
are all
guard.
monsters.
They're monsters too.
Even though there are actual, like, monsters down here.
Yeah.
Right.
So funny though.
All these humans have great watches. I'm going to go buy one.
It's a tough immigration policy they got down there.
Yeah. Exactly.
So these knights take Boji to meet the king, and it's King Desha, and he's the second ranked king, and he's the king of the underworld. And basically, they're like, okay,
It's like, that's something. That's
yeah,
dude.
we were sent to find a guy to train us. Anyway, can you help us find him? And he's like, well, you mean me? You want me to train you? And he's like, oh, let's test Boji. And Boji has to fight the knight, and he obviously can't hurt him, but he is able to dodge all his attacks, despite this being the leader of the knights.
Super Saiyan style.
He's like,
Yes.
he's like, hey, so train him. He's like, no, I'm not gonna train him. I can't make him stronger. There's nothing I can do for him. He's like, well, I have a letter of recommendation, and he reads the letter, and then he tears it up. He's like, nope, not helping you get out of my kingdom. And they're thrown out, and they're crying, and their dreams are dashed. Boji's trying to pick up rocks, and the first one's way too big, so he goes to this little rock, and he's still struggling. And the knight comes up, and he's like, hey, here's the letter. And Kage's like, what do we need the letter for? He's like, you went to the wrong guy. You went to King Desha. You want Prince Despa, his younger brother. He's the one who will help you. But Desha hates him, and since you didn't, you messed up, he screwed with you. So
He hates him because he's better looking.
He's just handsome. Yeah,
That's
he's so
the
pretty.
only reason. I mean, I'm sure there's more to it, but that superficial reason is enough. Like, even Despa relates it, and you get this flashback of, like, King Desha sitting in a dark room weeping at a mirror. You've got, like, the side of his face, and because the way they drew him, he's got, like, this big fish mouth that's open, really wide, and it's got sharp teeth. So he looks really bad, but apparently he knows it. So good.
There's even a statue in town of King Desha that he himself mangled so people wouldn't look at his face.
I'm too ugly.
Meanwhile, the spear guy, Apius, goes down into that basement. And we see that he's been there before. He actually used to help collect the monsters that are frozen down there. And he had been taken down there once when he was just a weak spearman. But now he's super powerful. And he's going to kill Despa to get, you tried to kill me, I'm going to take you out. And he gets down there, and the mirror's
Daida.
like, hey, Daida, you're right. Yes, Prince, he's going to go kill King Daida. And the mirror's like, hey, don't do that. It was me who did all this. And he really recognizes the mirror as Miranjo, and we're going to talk about her in a second. What I love about this is it reveals that Beben actually cared about Prince Daida's well-being, and the mirror couldn't have that. So she orchestrated Beben's death by sending him after Apius, knowing that Apius would be loyal to her because she's the one who gave him his power. Time to talk about Miranjo, the mirror on the wall. What do you guys think?
Very interested in her character. We don't get a ton of context, but she's obviously desperately in love with King Base. And willing to do and commit atrocities to be with him. And she's definitely much older than she's letting on, or at least it seems that way. But she's we come to find out she's also just the worst. Apparently, she's killed hundreds of people as a girl.
Seemed
So
unintentional, but yeah,
yeah,
It's hard to know, yeah.
it is hard to know. Yeah.
but yeah, well, it'll be interesting to find out more about her, because she ends up using a ton of mana later, and in order to replenish it, she has to go back to the underworld. So it's like, well, why? So I'm super interested in this character, but because of her implications of the world, but we actually don't get a lot of information about her. Just as she's kind of manipulating everything behind the scenes. She is the puppet master.
Yeah. And I mean, the fact that she was with King Boss when he made the pact with that demon is very interesting too. It makes me wonder if the first queen died at her hands, right? Because she's clearly, like you said, in love with King Boss. She's very jealous. She manipulates things from behind the scene. We have absolutely no information about why that first queen died, the giantess. She's just gone. And then later when Miranjo wants to assassinate Queen Hyaline, he lets her try. And there doesn't even really seem to be a purpose behind the assassination at that point, other than just get her out of here. She's not useful.
She even says, "Remember, you promised you would do this."
Yeah, so it's like a mistress saying you promised you'd leave your wife, right? In this case, you promised you'd let me assassinate her. So she's a very interesting character, but I wonder if the anime is going to do the same thing with her that they did with everybody else and try to make her sympathetic and try to show some side of her that's relatable and justifying her actions.
That's 100% the vibe I got. Because at first I'm like, okay, so this is the villain of our story. And then there's the scene where Bosse is talking to her and he's like, no, you're perfect and beautiful and wonderful. And I'm like, that's so weird after everything that's going on for him to say that to her. Yeah. So then we get the scene of her inside of Daida, where we see like a younger version of her and her hands are cut off and we learn her flesh has been peeled from her face and she wears a mask, and that changes the entire context of what Bosse said. Now it's not, oh, I love you, but like, no, you're not as the horrible thing they made you out to be. You are beautiful, and a really kind thing to say. I'm like, oh, you're gonna make me like her. You're gonna, you're totally not gonna make her the villain.
Yep.
Dang it. Mm-hmm. All right, then, so APS arrives. He spares Daida. Daida spares him in return, and then APS knocks him out, and they force him to drink the drink. And then we get Boji reaching the home of his trainer, whose name is Despa, the younger brother of Desha. And like we said, he is a beautiful man.
Talk about exaggerated. Like the art style used for him almost tries to make him look like a, like stone art, like a statuesque image. Mm-hmm. But then his pantaloons are just hysterical. He completely deforms his body shape.
What I love is how pretty he is, and yet if you make fun of his face, just loses it.
Yes.
I love that. You can make fun of my apprentice, but if you make fun of my face...
Yep.
Wait, no, the Kage is like, I think it's the other way around.
Yeah, now we have to question if that is real.
Yeah.
Don't we?
Yeah.
What about the earlier fight? Do you think that was real or just setup?
So, if you're talking about the fight, like when he comes back with the face.
The first night he comes all beat up. The guys he pays later are supposed to be the same guys.
So he may have legitimately got beaten up, and he just was like, "Hey, these would be good guys to use for my setup."
He didn't use the same guys because these guys apologized. We're like, "We're so sorry. We know we hit you twice." They're guards, but he might have been like, "Okay, I got beat up, so I'll hire some guards and play with the story."
Maybe. I don't know.
I guess that's my thoughts on this, because we need to talk about it in a little bit, is that while he ends up being a good character and a good person, he also constantly gives off the vibe of a con man. Constantly. Yes. And he's doing all the con man things, but with good intention at the same time. And it's something different I haven't seen before. A con man who actually is delivering what he promised.
Yep. And every step of the way, you're wondering when he's gonna trick you.
Right. Any other thoughts on him?
I just loved some of the scenes. He was hysterical, and they played with his art so much. When they would contort the faces of the characters, it seemed like they had more fun with these characters, with the time that they spent with Despa, than they did throughout the rest of the show, through this first 11 episodes.
All right. So he brings them in. He assesses Bochi's powers, and he's like, "Yeah, he'll never have strength. He literally cannot have strength. But I'll train him anyway after they pay him."
I do like that about Boji, is that there's multiple characters throughout this story that sense that there's latent something about him, but they're unsure why he's suppressed, but that they all come to the same conclusion that he'll never be strong. This isn't something he can overcome, or this is some sort of curse we can dispel, or, some sort of thing he can go do. This is something that is blocking him forever. And it's interesting that everyone's coming to the same conclusion. I'm wondering if that's going to be subverted later on.
Almost like a parallel with having a disability.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the two are definitely linked. Mm-hmm. There was a book I read a long time ago where the main premise of the magic was that you would inscribe runes on yourself and on other people. And those people that you inscribed the runes on would then, depending on what rune that you inscribed on them, siphon some of their attribute, essentially. And so if you inscribed a strength rune on somebody, you would take their strength, intelligence rune, you'd take their mind. And so what would happen is the people that were like nobles would inscribe these people and then make sure to take care of them, because if you took their strength, they would probably wind up catatonic. But you can't let them die, because then you can't have their strength anymore. If you take their intelligence, they become imbeciles. They can't do anything. And so they'd have these big wards of people that they would take care of. It was medieval though. And it reminded me of that, because we have the same situation here where he's taking his strength, but he probably thought, King Boss was taking his firstborn son's strength, but he probably thought he'll just be a normal giant. He won't have superior strength. He'll just have normal strength. But then to see, oh no, he's disabled and worse off than a human. So it makes sense why everybody's looking at it, is oh no, what happened to you is really bad.
So we get a scene of Boji doing chores and cooking a meal, and he throws everything in it whole. He goes, they show him going to crack the egg, and so he just places it gently in the bowl. And then he feeds it to Kage and Despa, and man, Kage just threw it all down his gullet. I didn't even take a bite, just poured it. But yeah, it's poisonous to them, basically. Yeah. Literally gives Despa a vision of giants, which makes him realize, oh, Boji's a giant, because giants literally used to just eat mountains or whatever they would just eat whatever they wanted. And he has that ability, so whatever he eats tastes great, but it'll kill us. And I love, this scene is great because it looks like it's about to say, look, we found his secret power. But, and Kage thinks that too. He's like, so what does that mean? It means he can never cook for us again. No impact on the story. Moving on. And we go on to our training montage. We can see Boji pick a weapon, but we don't get to see what it is. And then him basically getting his Rockies on. He's even in the sweats, jogging and doing dodges from animals.
Gonna need a montage.
Yep, I was literally singing it. Yep. And then one day, Kage, who does chores whenever there's training going on, he hears a big smash and he goes and he's like, "Hey, is everything okay?" And Despa's like, "Everything's fine," and he closes the door. But Kage's not in, and Boji was standing next to a boulder that had been smashed in half, and he's like, "What is happening?"
I do love how that's never explained either.
Yes, it is.
It's that
Partially.
The pressure point that the rock had, you know? that's what it was.
It's the same thing from Demon Slayer. You find the weak point.
By smelling
Oh,
it.
he's good at smelling.
Yeah.
No, Boji actually has to study stuff. Like, he has to study human anatomy books. And apparently geology.
Yeah. There's a little bit of a difference.
Okay. Then we get a shot of Daida sitting on the throne, but he's clearly not Daida anymore, and he says, "I have sacrificed my second son." We've already mentioned that scene.
Mm-hmm.
But and you know, I watched this with my younger son and my teenage daughter, and she kept blurting out spoilers as she figured stuff out. She's like, "Oh, he means Boji." And I'm like, I was about to figure that out. Now I look stupid. I'm a kid to tell me what's happening. Do a podcast. Leave me alone.
Can't watch anime with you anymore.
We get the flashback of Base getting his power, asking the demon, he's like, "Hey, I need power." And the demon's like, "I can't just give you power. It's got to come from somewhere. So pick a relative." He's like, "I don't have relatives." "Well, then you need to go have a kid, and I'll take it from him." And Base is like, "All right." And he finds the strongest, most powerful woman giant he can.
I love this part.
They wrestle.
Quite literally, that is what they do.
Yep, to see if they're strong enough to get married. And by the way, that's her idea. Like, "Oh, bring it on, big boy. Let's see if you can stand up." And then they get married. And I love the scene. They show a scene of like Boss is in this giant battle, spears are in him, he's losing, and then suddenly he just like flexes and heals and gets twice as big. And he's like, "My son is born."
Yeah.
And kills everything. And he comes home, sees little baby Boji, and is like, "I have done bad, and I'm going to make amends." He doesn't say that exactly, but that was my interpretation of.
He goes out and breaks a rock.
Yep. And he tells the people, "I'm not being a warrior anymore. I'm a king now, and so that's what we're gonna do." And they're like, "Yeah, cool."
This is one of those things where, like, when we were introduced to the kingdom at the very beginning in episode 1, it said that the people, this guy just showed up and killed all these orcs that were attacking, and the people were like, "We're going to make you a king."
Yeah.
And that's not what happened. He came back and said, "I'm going to be king," and the people accepted him. It seems like a small, minor difference, but this show does that, where
It is interesting.
it tells you something, and it's just a little bit off. Just like with the monsters coming from hell and the guards protecting everybody from them. It's a little bit off. Technically correct, but not quite.
The best kind of truth.
Yeah.
The best kind of correct.
Yep.
We get Hakuro returning to the Base Kingdom. Yeah, by the way, I love the kingdom was just named after the dude who made them. Yeah, that's like land. Anyway, he returns home, and we get a flashback of him telling Damas, like, "I'm going back," and Damas is like, "That's stupid. They'll kill you." And this is kind of why I got the Tucker analogy, because Damas knows if he does this, he's gonna get killed. Like, if he goes back, his time serving the king is over if he assassinates. But if he doesn't do it, he can't go back anyway. So really, there's no difference in the penalty whether he does it or doesn't do it. He chooses to do it because there's something personal to him that pushes him to do it. That's where I get the Shao Tucker analogy. Anyway, Damas is like, "You're an idiot for going back. They'll kill you." And he's like, "Yeah, but that's what needs to happen. They need to know." And he goes back and he tells them, and they're like, and Queen Eileen's like, off with his head and every other body part. They put him on a stake. We also get preparations for the assassination of Hyaline happening by Miranjo and Boss, and this is where she's like, "Hey, here's 4 monsters I have ready to assassinate her," and Boss is like, "Let me fight one." Boom. Oh, now there's only 3. Okay.
I also thought it was really cool that when he hit that one, he later hit the shield, the bodyguard. And then he grinned and was like, "Okay." I think at that point he was gauging how much strength it took and what each one could take. Like, kind of sizing up that bodyguard to see, is he going to be capable of handling the 3 that are left? And he must have measured that, yes, he would.
Yeah, and you got to watch him closely because you're right. That I didn't even pick up that. I remember him hitting him, and I didn't even realize he had just gotten done hitting the other thing. Anyway, a lot happens really quick. Hakura's about to be killed. Domas shows up in a mask and saves them, but Base jumps down and stops them, and then he's like, "Hey, I'm Base." I also love that they didn't like, "Oh, I'm Daida. I'm totally in Daida." He's like,
Yeah.
"Nope, I'm Base. I stole my son's body. You all need to deal with it. What are you gonna do about it?"
I did like that when he went to hit Domas and Domas parried. He's like, "Oh, that's Domas."
Yeah. I
Yeah.
know your fighting style.
I know who you are.
And then he tells everyone, like, hey, they're not going to be executed because Boji's still alive. Because we had just had a scene where he's asked Mirror, Mirror on the wall, literally, who's the strongest of them all, and it had showed him Boji. Boji is now the strongest person in the land, and he's like, he loves that. So he's like, hey, guys, everyone, Boji is fine. He's alive, so these guys don't need to be executed, but you do have to leave the country, but don't secretly leave the country. I need you to go on a secret mission to kill the demons that my mirror girlfriend is using to assassinate my wife.
Mm-hmm.
Well, shut down the portal, right?
Yeah. Which, yeah, to me means like he's subverting her plans by cutting them off at the source. Because
there's a scene specifically where she's like, hey, can you tell what he's saying? And they're like, no. So he's obviously hiding it from her. We have the scene again with Hyline's bodyguard, who we never named, but it's written here somewhere. But it doesn't matter. He's the bodyguard guy. And then
I think something like that.
Hyline's like, "Who are you?" And he's like, "Oh no, I'm your husband. Look, I can crush this into a diamond like I did that one time that I got you to marry me." And she's like, "Where's our son?" And he's like, "I don't know."
Later.
Okay, bye. She goes into hysterics, and she's in her room, and so then the assassin monsters come, and this guard has to fight them, and we see that he's literally covered in head to toe in armor as they're trying to bite him, but he can't beat them, even though they can't hurt him, and they're at a stalemate. So he flexes off his armor.
So anime.
So anime. So Fast and the Furious.
And of course, each piece of armor that hits the ground cracks the floor, showing just how heavy each piece was. Mm-hmm. Yep. So apparently this was his weight suit.
Yeah, it's why he was so slow, because everybody was like, he's so slow.
Yep. That is right. He ends up getting bit by 2 of the monsters, but he managed to kill all 3 of them.
Which is sad, because they even make us sympathetic towards the monsters when they show where the monsters came from.
They were just a happy herd of monsters, and this mirror came along and possessed them and forced them to be monsters. Yep. We see Base dance with Miranjo when she's in her puppet form, which she can only hold for a little while. And she's like, hey, we lost. And he's like, oh, well. And she's like, well, I gotta go get my own monsters. He's like, okay, bye. And then Hyaline goes to confront him. And she's like, hey, where's our son? And he's like, don't worry about it. She's like, did you try to have me killed? Kinda. And then
don't worry about it.
We've also seen Daida in the blackness that we talked about when we were talking about his character and how he's going crazy in there, and he's screaming for help, and she can hear him, and she starts screaming, and he can hear her, and she's like, "Where could he be?" And she's like, "Oh, he's in his chest."
And she has this like superhuman moment where she like closes her eyes, and like the camera kind of pans around her, like, pew.
Yep.
I felt like they were just making fun of Boji at that point. No. So she literally pulls out a knife and is like, I'm gonna cut you out. And her bodyguard has to grab her. He's like, no, that's your son's body. If you stab it, your son will die. And then he knocks her out. And then Boss is like, you need to get her out of here because there's definitely going to be another assassination attempt. So you guys are not safe here. So you guys should go. Good luck.
Have fun storming me in the castle.
Mm-hmm. Then Daida swears vengeance on Miranjo, or the mirror, for putting him in there. Then we get Boji's training has ended, and the Despot takes him out to dinner. We find out his weapon of choice is a rapier. And we get this, what ends up being a setup fight scene to test him. And he can, even though he hits you very softly, he hits specific points to make sure he puts you right on the chin so you get a concussion. So he can beat weak enemies with just his fists now. And he can do acupuncture.
Yes. Okay. I laugh, but I also really like it. It's cool. Like, it takes me back to the days of the Kevin Sorbo Hercules and Xena, right? Like, that's what they did. Yes.
I was thinking of the
They
movie
were
Kiss.
always doing the pressure points.
Kiss of the Dragon with Jet Li, where he had the bracelet
Oh,
of
dude, that was
needles
so
and
good.
throw it into
Yeah.
bad guys and pin them down.
Yeah.
But yeah, basically, now Boji has the ability with his tiny little needle sword to just stab into pressure points and knock people out in a single hit, or kill people in a single hit, depending on how he feels. We get him chanting the 3 rules of the swordsmanship, which we don't know. Yep.
Actually, that was one thing I appreciated, because like all of a sudden he's like, "Hey, you guys go on ahead. I have something to take care of." I'm like, "Oh, great! This was just one big setup for Boji to make him feel better," and he's just conning him. And of course, he comes to this like opening where the 3 dudes that attacked him are there waiting for their payment, and I'm just like, "Yep, here we go." And then they start having this conversation, and the dude's like, "Yeah, I did not expect to go out like that." And I'm like, "Wait, he just paid him to
It's true.
test him? He really is that strong? Wow." So
Yep.
that was decent. Like, that is one thing this show does a really good job. It takes these tropes and goes, "Nope, it's this actually."
Mm-hmm.
Agreed. We get Boji wondering, they're like, "Okay, should we go back?" Boji and Kage, and he's like, I feel like Queen Hyline's the one trying to kill me. I don't know if she wants me dead. And Kage's like, "She's the one who was healing you. You know, you're kind of being a jerk." and Boji has to punch himself in the face and slam his face into the ground a lot to punish himself for not believing in people, and they decide to go back.
So this was really interesting because Tanya asked me, like, what in the world was that? Why did he do that? And the only conclusion that I could come to was that he's genuinely scared. Kage was saying, "You're a coward. You're afraid to go back." And one of the things I've seen before is people will have a character like hurt themselves so that they're not afraid of being hurt. So by like beating himself up and smashing his face on the ground, he could then be like, whatever they do, it can't be this bad. So that's the impression I got.
Except he can't hit very hard, so.
Yeah. I wonder if he's also as delicate, like without the strength.
He took a punch from one of those troll guys and was fine, but then were they pulling their punches or not?
Even
Probably
if they
not.
weren't, this is post-training, so, you know, he's now got the Kaioken times 10.
It did throw him across the room, and he was fine.
Yeah.
I'm ignoring your joke and moving on. We get a flashback of Daida remembering his brother and getting the magic mirror and how that kind of corrupted him and made him envious of Boji and looking down on him. And then he remembers a time where he had called Boji weak to Bebin, and Bebin's like, "Yeah, let's go to town." And they went and they observed a blind and deaf man. And he's like, basically, Daida's like, "Yeah, if I was like that, I wouldn't live." He's like, "So you wouldn't be strong enough to live like that?" He's like, "No, that's not what I meant." He's like, "No, that is what it is. They're strong enough to go on despite that, and you need to appreciate that kind of strength too." Which he's been kind of like, "Oh, I'm trapped in darkness and can't see anything. Is this what my brother's life has been like?" Gaining what some would call empathy. The more you know. Nope. Is Jeremy frozen? Or is he just doing a really good bit?
No, I think he's frozen.
Oh, thank goodness. Anyway, Daida is he meets a little girl in there with him, and it's Moranjo when she was a little girl, and she has no hands, and her face has been peeled off by villagers who said they killed her, so they did this to her for killing them. And
This
I'm a
scene
little
is
worried about
weird.
cause and effect. Yep.
So it, besides the content of the scene, what's odd about it is Daida is stuck in this limbo inside of Daida that's being controlled by Boss. Why is a scene about Moranjo in here?
I'm guessing because it's her spell that put him in here.
Well, it was an elixir. So, I mean, it looked like it could have, I guess it could be her spell, but I think there's something more going on here as far as the whole resurrection thing. But, I mean, that's just pontificating at this point. It seemed off that it would be someone, like, this is the first time he's seen another person inside of this blackness, right?
Are you asking because you think it's like a mystery to solve, or because it's the error in the storytelling?
No, definitely a mystery to solve.
Okay.
Like, I think there's a decent reason behind it, which mixes up Boss, Daida, and Moranjo kind of in this, like, conspiracy that's happening.
Web, yeah. I like that.
And I wonder if Moranjo has more to do with the demon that gave Boss his strength than the stories let on. Because, I mean, obviously, she was there when they were making the contract, but I think there's something more going on.
Right. There's not a whole lot of story left here at the end. We get Moranjo going to the underworld and coming back. We go back to King Desha, the king of the underworld, realizing something's wrong, and he goes to his prison cells, and people have been set free. They're missing. And he's like, okay, that's messed up. It was the kingdom of Basse has stolen our prisoners. So let's go take it. We'll say we're going to go stop them, and let's just take the kingdom of Basse. They're having a lot of troubles right now anyway. They got like a kid who doesn't even know what's going on. So that's his plan. Meanwhile, graduating from Despa, Boji gets a little bit of encouragement from him. And then those knights come up and they're like, hey, we're going to your kingdom anyway. You want to ride? So these knights really like Despa, even though they're not supposed to really talk to him because of the
And the head captain really likes Boji.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, you know, when someone dodges like that with such good animation, it tends to win you over.
I did like how they rolled up there, like, get on, loser, we're going to Basse's kingdom.
All right, and then let's see what anything else that happens here at the end. So they're riding. We get a list of villains, which I'm sure will all appear in part 2. The main one is Oaken. He looks like he's going to be our main villain.
The Sword King, or
yeah, he was the former head of these knights, and was so evil they locked him up. Yeah.
And then also Queen Hilling has armor and is riding back.
Okay, can we talk about the armor though? It's so big. Is it made for just riding on a horse? Did she gain weight while she was gone? But yeah, she's like, hey, I've gathered an army. She has like 6 guys and her guard. She's like, I'm gonna go take it back. That's the strongest guy in the world you're gonna go fight.
They roll up on the castle wall. They're coming to the gate, and like the soldiers are coming out, like they're leaving.
Yeah.
And they're like, hey, what happened? Like, oh, those 6 bad guys, they took Boss captive. And nobody asks the question, why are you leaving? Why aren't you going in? But, yeah, that's never...
They do say, though.
Hey!
I'm back.
Jamie's back.
Right.
Jamie's back.
Well, internet just cut out.
Yeah. we thought you were doing this great Stonewall bit to what I was doing this stupid bit, and then you were just stonewalling me. I was like, oh, he is so committed. I feel ashamed. Because you were just staring there deadpan at us, and then we realized, oh, no, he's dead. He died.
I'm dead.
Oh
man.
So why were they leaving then?
Bosse has been abducted.
Right.
And
why aren't they going in to defend him?
Because they're weak. They're like, let's get out of here.
But that's the thing, is
strongest
like,
guy
if
in
it's
the
your
world.
army, like, that didn't make sense to me that they would be leaving.
Well, one of the things that I
Like,
noticed...
oh, he's captured, I guess I'm out.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I noticed is that, like, the armies of people that actually matter seem to be very small. Yeah. They have really high power levels for very small groups of people. So if these are like the peons...
Like, hey, turn around and get in there. Let's go.
I think she probably knew that there's no way they'd be able to do anything. I mean, one of those guys is the commander of the most powerful army in the world. So, like, regular soldiers are probably screwed.
So Jason's talking about the soldiers that are running out while Hyline's army is running in. And just wondering why they... But I figured...
Nobody asked the question, hey guys, why are you leaving? Let's go get the king back.
Yeah. I think the thing that I had more issues with was how long had she been gone? Did she literally just leave with Dorsch and those 4 guys that have numbers on their helmets so that we could tell who's who?
Yeah,
I have a feeling they got as far as she then woke up and then she was like, no, we're going back.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it seemed like. Like, they never actually really left. They just got out, came back, which is very weird.
I laughed out loud, though, at the scene of her riding her horse, being like, everyone, hurry up, and everyone else has to walk behind her, and she's, like, riding fast and mad they're not going faster, and I'm like, that's classic her. That fits her character very well.
Troy also asked, like, why is her armor so enormous?
Oh, God, it's hysterical armor. Yes.
Yeah. She gained some weight while she was gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it was.
For the 20 minutes.
All right.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's really the end. Like, we see Boji and Kage riding on the back with the knights, and they're learning about the 6 bad guys that are in part 2, and that's where we end for part 11. Jeremy, we covered a lot. That, you were just sitting there quietly for some reason. Did you have any thoughts on anything that happened in these final 2 episodes?
No, it was all pretty cool. Just seeing with Despa, they were saying their goodbyes and everything. That was one of the scenes that I absolutely loved when he was repeating or saying back what the rules of swordsmanship, righteous swordsmanship were, and it's just gibberish, that was great. Other than that, yeah, this definitely seemed like the beginning of a tournament arc. So we'll see if that's where it goes.
Yeah, I thought this whole anime was going to be a tournament arc, so I'm kind of okay with that.
Troy, you doing like sign language or what?
Nope.
Just playing with his hands now.
Actually, my headphones cut out. I have no idea what Jeremy said, but I'm sure it was all...
It was fantastic.
It was great.
My wire has been struggling a little bit, as you guys probably remember from last time. Just having a fun technical difficulties night. It happens.
Yeah, we are.
But we're ready to wrap up. So let's go to our final reviews of the first 11 episodes of Ranking of Kings. Jeremy, why don't you hit us with what yours?
I really enjoyed it. The little teeny tiny technical issue I have with, like, why Boji is so fast if he has no strength, it just really doesn't matter in this case. They did such a good job of making each of the characters interesting and relatable in some ways, or at least sympathetic, where you can understand where they're coming from and why they're making the decisions they're making. When you're given enough information, there's definitely a lot of them that we're still waiting to see, like, give me more details. But given the record of the first 11 episodes, I'm pretty confident they're going to do a good job of giving us those details. So I'm really looking forward to the second half. Yeah, it's a 5 out of 5 for me.
Okay, Jason, how about you?
I'm also looking forward to the second half. I think there's a lot of cool tidbits here, especially near the end, of things I want to get answers to, as far as Boji and his giantness and the demon and Moranjo and Boss and that whole trifecta with Daida. I think there's a lot of potential here. This first half, I just wasn't pulled in. I don't hate it because it's not chibi. So I'm gonna give it a 3. I didn't hate it, but I didn't find myself getting pulled in. So
this anime is hitting all the boxes for me. I never felt like I knew where it was going. Even like, oh, this guy's a traitor. Are they gonna go through with this? Yeah, that stuff hit me. So I'm really happy. It feels very unique to me. It takes tropes and it twists them and turns it on its head. Yeah, so I'm loving it. And the emotional resonance of the main character. His smile is literally a 90-degree angle V. It's not even like a curvy smile. They just draw a V for the smile. And there's something so darn cute about it. It's a 5 for me. I'm very entertained. I'm having a blast watching it. It reminds me of watching old Game of Thrones and just not knowing what's going to happen. Just with less nudity. So, yeah. 5 for me. And then obviously our next anime is going to be the rest of this up to episode 23, like we've already mentioned. So that is what we'll be talking about in our next podcast episode. We would love to hear your thoughts on the early reviews of Ranking of Kings. If you've seen the whole thing, please don't spoil it for us, but you're welcome to share your thoughts on the entire anime, and we can even share them in our next podcast episode. Otherwise, feel free to leave that comment on our Twitter at Baka Podcast, on our website, theanimebakaclub.com. You can find a contact us link, or leave a comment wherever you found the podcast, and they'll get back to us. Thank you guys so much for the comments that you do send in, and I think it's time for us to say goodbye.
Thanks for listening.
See you next time.
Sayonara.